Have you ever wondered what would happen if Darth Plagueis had returned after the fall of the Empire? Today, we are going to explore the galaxy far, far away to discover what would happen if the major events from the universe were altered. What if Darth Vader had trained Kylo Ren? How about if Darth Bane had never implemented the rule of two? We will explore all these questions and more as we ponder what if? What if Darth Treya succeeded in ending the Force? It was not an explosion. It was not a violent purge. It was an absence that none could comprehend it until it was too late. One moment, the Force flowed through the galaxy, binding all things, whispering through the stars. The next, it was gone. Jedi and Sith alike collapsed in agony, their senses torn from them, their abilities vanished, like a flame suffocated by an unseen hand. Lightsabers flickered and died, their kyber crystals inert. The living lost a piece of themselves they did not even know was there. And at the epicenter, on Malachor 5, the exile, Mitra Surik, stood over the lifeless body of Darth Treya. She had won the duel, but the victory was meaningless. The Force was already unraveling, and nothing could stop it. The galaxy had changed forever. Across Coruscant, the Jedi Temple stood in eerie silence. The council chambers, once filled with wisdom and debate, were now filled with confusion and terror. Grand Master Rook Lamar collapsed in meditation, clutching his chest as if suffocating. Masters Atris, Zez-Kai-El, and Kavar struggled to reach out with the Force, only to find nothing. "It is gone," whispered Atris, her voice hollow. We are blind." The Jedi, once generals, diplomats, and peacekeepers, had lost their connection to the universe. For some, it was a death sentence. Older masters whose lives had been extended by the Force withered into husks. Others were driven mad by the sudden silence, unable to comprehend a world where they could not feel, foresee, or protect. The Jedi Order collapsed within days. Without their power, they were ordinary beings, easily hunted, easily broken. The Sith, too, suffered. The dark side, which had granted them dominance, had turned to dust in their hands. Many died instantly, their bodies rejecting the unnatural energies that had once sustained them. Darth Nihilus, the Lord of Hunger, who had survived by consuming the Force itself, simply crumbled into ash. The Jedi were gone. The Sith were gone. But what of the galaxy? War had always defined the galaxy, but now, without the Force, it became something different. Blaster fire replaced the hum of lightsabers. Starfighters swarmed across the void without the guidance of precognition. Battles were fought without the intervention of mystic warriors. The Republic, weakened without its Jedi protectors, struggled to maintain order. The Mandalorians, long resentful of the Jedi, saw this as their moment. No longer would Force wielders decide the fate of the galaxy from their high towers. They launched invasions on war-torn worlds, their crusades unchecked by Jedi or Sith. On Nar Shaddaa, crime lords flourished. Where once a Sith Lord might have ruled through fear, now the underworld belonged to those who could scheme and kill with brute force. The Hutt cartels rose in prominence, filling the power vacuum left behind. And on Korriban, the ancient tombs of the Sith remained still. The spirits that once whispered to the Dark Apprentices had gone silent. The ghosts of the past were truly dead. Not all Jedi had perished. Some had survived, not through power, but through resilience. Mitra Surik wandered the wastelands of Malachor, haunted by her own existence. She had been the wound in the Force, the key to Treya's plan, and now she was left in a world without the energy that had once defined her. She was not alone. Other Jedi, those strong enough to adapt, had gone into hiding, living as ordinary beings. Some became scholars, studying ancient texts in vain, searching for any sign that the Force might return. Others took up swords and blasters, using their training in the old ways to defend what little peace remained. A handful still believed that the Force was not truly gone, that it was merely sleeping, waiting for something, someone, to call it back. The battlefield was silent in a way it had never been before. There was no hum of ignited lightsabers, no distant pull of the Force, warning of an unseen attack. The galaxy had been stripped of its guiding current, and those who had once been its most powerful warriors now fought as mortals. The Jedi and Sith had clashed for millennia, their duels guided by instinct, by foresight, by the deep and constant whispers of the Force. Now there was nothing, and without it, the Sith faltered. Darth Malachar swung wildly, his crimson blades slicing through the air, missing his Jedi opponent by mere inches. His rage had always been his strength. The dark side had always guided his movements, but now his anger was empty, blinded by years of over-reliance on power that no longer existed. He left himself exposed. Across from him, Jedi Knight Saras Van stood still, her lightsaber held in a steady grip. She had been trained to trust in patience, in discipline, in measured action. The Sith's movements were chaotic, frenzied, desperate. She saw the gap. With one swift step forward, she parried his blade, twisted her wrist, and slashed across his chest. Malachar staggered, clutching his wound in shock. This was not how it was supposed to be. He had never feared the Jedi before, but without the dark side to guide him, he was slow, predictable, weak. All across the battlefield, the same story played out. The Sith lashed out in blind fury, their strikes heavy and aggressive, but without the Force to fuel them, they were reckless. Jedi, trained in patience and restraint, sidestepped, ducked, countered. Blades clashed, but the duels were short. Without precognition, without power, the Sith's fatal flaw was exposed. They had never learned to fight without their rage. Darth Malachar dropped to his knees, his breath ragged. He had never known exhaustion in battle before. He had never fought without feeling invincible. Saras Van raised her blade, looking down at him. "Without the Force, you are nothing," she said. His grip on his saber weakened. He knew she was right, and in the end, the Sith fell, not to overwhelming power, but to their own over-reliance on it. The Jedi had not won through strength, but through the simplicity of control. The Jedi had always spoken of balance, of prophecy, of destiny. But what was destiny if the Force no longer existed to guide it? The chosen one, the one meant to bring balance, his fate was erased. If he was ever to be born, he would now be nothing more than a mortal soul. Visions of the future were lost. No longer would wise masters see what was to come, shaping events before they could unfold. Now, only chaos remained. In the vastness of the unknown regions, strange cults arose. Groups who once followed the teachings of the Force now turned to other means, desperate to reclaim their lost power. Some turned to ancient technology, searching for relics of a time when the Force had spoken. Others turned to blood rituals, believing that the sacrifice could awaken what had been lost. But the galaxy did not listen. For decades, the galaxy moved forward. Generations passed. The Force became a myth, spoken in hushed tones, in old texts that few read. Then, on a distant world, something stirred. A child, born without knowledge of the old ways, stood on the edge of a battlefield. She did not understand why, but when she closed her eyes, she could feel something. A whisper, a call. The Force had not been destroyed. It had been wounded. buried beneath layers of silence. But life persisted, and as long as there was life, there was the Force. The cycle could not be broken. It could only begin again. The Force had become legend, a forgotten whisper in the endless void of space. For centuries, the galaxy moved on without it. Empires rose and fell, wars raged and ended, but no Jedi or Sith emerged to shape destiny. Until the child. Her name was unknown to history, lost in the obscurity of a simple life on a barren world. She was not trained, nor was she descended from any ancient bloodline, but something within her stirred, something long buried beneath the silence of the universe. She stood on the ruins of a battlefield, her breath shallow as she reached out, not with her hands, but with something deeper, something unseen. And for the first time in centuries, the Force responded. A gust of wind rushed through the valley. The stars above seemed to pulse with light. Something had awakened. Far away on a forgotten world, an old man sat in meditation. His robes were tattered, his face weathered by time. He had lived long past the days of the Force, past the collapse of the Jedi, past the death of prophecy. He had known its power once. He had known the great masters. He had fought in wars where the Force had guided every strike, and he had lived long enough to see it vanish. But now, his eyes snapped open. A ripple spread across the galaxy. Faint, but unmistakable. The Force had begun to return. The man rose from his place of exile. If the galaxy had forgotten the ways of the Jedi, he would remember for them. If the Sith had been erased, their knowledge would not be lost. It was time to find the one who had rekindled the flame. The child's awakening sent shockwaves through the remnants of the galaxy's forgotten mystics. The old cults, the secret scholars, those who had whispered of the Force in darkened halls, all turned their eyes to the stars. Rumours spoke of a world tied to the old ways. The graveyard where the Force had died. Malachor. Guided by instinct, the child made the journey alone, across uncharted space, to the place where the Force had been severed. The surface was desolate, a ruined wasteland of broken spires and ancient scars, and yet, beneath the stone and ash, the remnants of something remained. As she walked the shattered ground, she could hear them, the echoes of the past, the cries of Jedi and Sith who had fallen here, their voices tangled in the ruins of history. And at the heart of it all, deep beneath the surface, she found it. A presence, not living, not dead, a wound in the Force. The old man had followed her across the stars, drawn by the same presence. He watched as she knelt before the shattered remnants of what had once been a great temple. And then, she reached out. The air trembled. A wave of unseen energy pulsed outward, rippling across the stars, spreading through every living thing. The Force roared back into existence. On distant worlds, those who had long abandoned their faith in the Force felt its presence flood back into their bodies. Creatures long thought to be extinct stirred once more, their connection restored. Kyber crystals, silent and lifeless for so long, began to glow with renewed energy. And those who had been waiting, those who had believed, they knew. The Jedi would rise again. The Sith would return. The Force had never truly died. It had only been waiting, waiting for someone to remember. What if Darth Revan had never turned back to the light? The Jedi Council had stripped him of his memories, reforging him as a tool for the Republic. They sought to erase Darth Revan and replace him with their own agent, a Jedi puppet who would do their bidding. But fate, or the Force itself, had different plans. As Darth Malak's flagship, the Leviathan, trembled under the weight of battle, Revan faced the truth of who he once was. Malak's words cut deep, revealing the Jedi's deception. The Council had taken his past, manipulated his identity, and turned him against his allies. But the truth did not break him, it strengthened him. Revan's hand clenched around the hilt of his lightsaber. His memories were fragments, but they were his. He had not been weak. He had been a conqueror. Bastila Shan stood before him, the Jedi's hope of redemption. Her golden blade hummed in defiance, her voice steady, yet pleading. "We can still stop Malak," she said. "We can destroy the Sith Empire. Together." Revan's eyes burned with something beyond anger. Purpose. He saw now that the Jedi feared power, that they had tried to mold him into their weapon. No longer. "I was powerful, and now I will be once more." Bastila barely had time to react. In one fluid motion, Revan's crimson blade ignited, slashing through her defenses. The Jedi Knight staggered, gasping as her saber fell from her hands. She had tried to redeem him. Instead, she had only ensured her own fall. Revan's return sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Republic, believing him lost to their cause, now faced their worst nightmare. Darth Revan, at full power, his strategic mind unchained, and his control over the Starforge absolute. Without hesitation, he crushed Malak and reclaimed his throne as Dark Lord of the Sith. His forces, once fragmented under Malak's erratic rule, now moved with brutal precision. He was not like Malak. Where Malak had ruled through terror and reckless destruction, Revan ruled with cold calculation. The Republic's fleets fell before him, unable to counter his tactical brilliance. One by one, Jedi enclaves were obliterated. He did not seek their extinction, only their submission. Some Jedi turned willingly, others fought to the bitter end. The Sith Empire grew, its might stretching further than even during the Great Sith War. Revan's war was not one of mindless slaughter, but one of inevitability. He did not need to burn the Republic to the ground. He simply made it irrelevant. The Jedi Order, broken and scattered, sought refuge on hidden worlds. The Republic Senate, paralyzed by fear, fell into chaos. And then, the final blow. Revan's fleet descended upon Coruscant. The Republic's last great bastion fell without a fight. The Senate had surrendered. The Sith Empire had won. But for Revan, victory was never the end. It was only the beginning. With the Republic's fall, the galaxy braced for an age of darkness. But Revan did not rule through blind brutality. His empire was not the chaotic, war-torn nightmare of past Sith regimes. He saw beyond the petty rivalries of Sith Lords, beyond the endless cycles of destruction that had defined his predecessors. He restructured the Sith Order. No longer would it be a nest of backstabbing ambition. Those who followed him would serve a greater purpose. Strength, intelligence, and loyalty were rewarded. Those who sought only personal gain were eliminated. There was no room for weakness. And yet, something stirred in the shadows. Not all Jedi had been defeated. A small, hidden enclave remained, a last hope for the light. Among them, a former friend, Mitra Surik, the Jedi exile. Surik had once fought alongside Revan in the Mandalorian Wars. She had followed his command, admired his brilliance, But now, she stood against him, leading a desperate resistance. She and a handful of surviving Jedi Masters prepared for one last stand. Revan, ever the strategist, allowed them to believe they had a chance. And then he crushed them. The battle was swift. One by one, the Jedi fell. Only Mitra remained. "Why?" she asked, her voice filled with both rage and sorrow. "You were our leader. You fought for something greater." "I still do," Revan said, igniting his saber. "But you cannot see it." Revan had spent years ensuring his empire would not fall into the same traps as the Sith of old. But Sith were always Sith. Ambition could not be erased. It could only be controlled for a time. Some of his closest allies began to plot against him. A dark shadow loomed. Darth Nihilus, a being of pure hunger. And Darth Sion, the undying executioner. They saw Revan's empire not as strength, but as weakness, and so they struck. The civil war was brutal. Revan faced them alone. Nihilus, whose very presence drained the life from the Force itself. Sion, who could not be killed, whose body was held together by pure hatred, and countless traitorous Sith believing they could seize power. But Revan had always been the strongest. The battle raged across the ruins of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Lightning clashed against saber. The Force screamed in agony. Sion fell first, finally broken beyond repair. Nihilus could not consume what was already whole. Revan destroyed him utterly. The traitors were slaughtered, and at the end of it all, Revan stood alone. The galaxy belonged to him. There were no Jedi left. The Sith had been reshaped in his image. The Republic was a relic of the past. For years, he ruled in silence. Order, stability, an empire that stretched across the stars. But power was a void that could never be filled. And in the silence of the Dark Lord's throne, Revan finally understood. The Sith always believed in strength, but true strength was not ruling. It was letting go. One day, Revan vanished. His empire continued, his legacy enduring in whispers. Some say he sought knowledge beyond the stars. Others believe he was searching for something even greater than power. But the truth remained. Darth Revan had left the galaxy forever changed. What if Darth Bane had never implemented the rule of two? The planet Ruusan bore witness to the climactic battles between the Sith Brotherhood of Darkness and the Jedi Army of Light. Amidst the chaos, a formidable Sith Lord named Darth Bane observed the relentless infighting and ambition that plagued his fellow Sith. Traditionally, Bane believed that the Sith's downfall was due to their numbers and internal strife, leading him to conceive the rule of two, a master and an apprentice, to preserve their secrecy and potency. However, Bane experienced a profound vision through the dark side of the Force. He foresaw a future where a unified Sith army, disciplined and loyal, could overwhelm the Jedi and dominate the galaxy. Embracing this vision, Bane decided against implementing the rule of two. Instead, he sought to reform the Brotherhood from within, aiming to eliminate internal dissent and forge a cohesive force. Assuming leadership after the demise of Lord Karn, Bane initiated a series of reforms to transform the Brotherhood of Darkness. He instituted a strict hierarchy, rewarding loyalty and punishing treachery. To prevent the destructive ambition that had previously plagued the Sith, Bane established a code of conduct that emphasized collective strength over individual power. Training academies were overhauled to focus on unity and strategy. Apprentices were taught to value the Sith Order's supremacy above personal gain. Bane's charismatic leadership and display of unparalleled power quelled potential rebellions, and his vision of a dominant Sith army began to take shape. The resurgence of a disciplined and unified Sith army did not go unnoticed. The Jedi Order, sensing a formidable threat, convened to address the growing darkness. Grand Master Hoth, who had previously led the Army of Light against the Sith, recognized the traditional Jedi tactics might be insufficient against this revitalized enemy. In response, the Jedi began to adapt, focusing on strengthening their own unity and combat strategies. They sought alliances with the Galactic Republic, emphasizing the need for a combined effort to counter the Sith's expanding influence. Under Bane's strategic command, the Sith launched a series of calculated offensives against key Republic systems. Their approach was methodical, targeting vital trade routes, communication hubs, and military installations. The sheer coordination and efficiency of the Sith army caught the Republic off guard, leading to significant territorial losses. Planets such as Corellia and Juro fell under Sith control, their defences overwhelmed by the relentless assault. The Sith's reputation grew, instilling fear across the galaxy. Bane's vision of a galaxy under Sith dominion seemed increasingly attainable. Emboldened by their successes, the Sith set their sights on Coruscant, the heart of the Republic. Bane believed that capturing the capital would deliver a decisive blow, breaking the Republic's morale and effectively ending the war. The siege was unprecedented in scale. Sith warships blockaded the planet, while ground forces launched assaults on key districts. Despite fierce resistance from the Jedi and Republic forces, the Sith's superior strategy and unity began to turn the tide in their favour. As the battle for Coruscant raged, Bane personally led an elite cadre of Sith warriors in an assault on the temple. The confrontation was brutal, with both sides sustaining heavy casualties. In the temple's inner sanctum, Bane faced Grand Master Hoth in a duel that would determine the galaxy's fate. The clash of lightsabers illuminated the darkened halls, each strike echoing the profound struggle between light and dark. Despite Hoth's formidable skills, Bane's mastery of the dark side and his indomitable will proved overwhelming. With a final, decisive blow, Bane struck down the Grand Master, signalling the collapse of organized Jedi resistance. With Coruscant under Sith control and the Jedi Order decimated, the Galactic Republic capitulated. Bane declared the dawn of a new era, with the Sith reigning supreme. He established a regime rooted in Sith philosophy, where strength and power dictated one's place in society. While some systems resisted, their efforts were swiftly crushed by the now dominant Sith military. The galaxy, once a beacon of democracy and hope, now languished under the oppressive shadow of the Sith. Despite Bane's efforts to instill unity, the inherent nature of the dark side, ambition, desire for power, and treachery began to resurface. High-ranking Sith Lords, emboldened by their victories, started to scheme against each other, each desiring greater influence and control. Bane, now an aging ruler, recognized the signs of impeding internal conflict. The very infighting he had once sought to eliminate threatened to unravel all he had built. In a bid to maintain order, he attempted to enforce stricter controls and purges, but the dark side's nature proved difficult to suppress. The Sith Empire, though mighty, began to fracture from within. Civil wars erupted as rival Sith factions vied for supremacy. What had once been a disciplined army of darkness now became a collection of warlords, each seeking to carve their own dominion. Sith lords betrayed one another, alliances were formed and broken within days, and the very fabric of Bane's empire began to unravel. Bane, now older, but still immensely powerful, saw the writing on the wall. He had succeeded in making the Sith dominant, but in doing so, he had only prolonged the inevitable cycle of destruction. The Sith, by their very nature, could never remain unified. He attempted to reassert control through sheer force, executing dissenters and imposing even harsher measures, but it was too late. Then came the moment Bane had feared the most. A direct challenge to his rule. Among the ambitious Sith Lords, one rose above the rest. Darth Vecros, a cunning and ruthless tactician, gathered by his own legion and openly declared Bane's reign over. Vecros believed the Sith needed not a single ruler, but a council of powerful lords governing together. He proclaimed that Bane, despite all his strength, had become a relic of the past. Bane, unwilling to let go of his empire, accepted the challenge. On the ruins of the former Jedi Temple on Coruscant, now a Sith stronghold, the two lords met in battle. The fight was a cataclysmic display of dark-side power, shaking the very foundation of the temple. Lightning cracked through the air, blades clashed, and the hatred between the two warriors burned hotter than the fires of Mustafar. Vecros was strong, stronger than Bane had expected. He was younger, faster, and possessed an unpredictable fighting style, honed through years of dueling against fellow Sith. But Bane was still the Dark Lord of the Sith, and his mastery of the dark side had no equal. With a titanic display of raw power, he broke through Vecros' defenses, impaling him through the chest. Vecros gasped, his strength fading. In his final act, he unleashed a Force maelstrom, an explosion of energy fueled by his dying rage. The blast consumed both of them, sending shockwaves through the Sith stronghold. When the dust settled, Darth Bane, the greatest Sith Lord of his era, was gone. With Bane dead, the Sith Order descended into all-out war. Without his leadership, no single Sith was strong enough to dominate the others, and the Empire fractured into countless warring factions once again. Sith Lords turned on each other, their armies clashing across the galaxies in an endless power struggle. The Republic, though weakened, took advantage of the Sith's infighting. Jedi who had survived the fall of Coruscant, now operating in secret, began to organize resistance cells. The Republic military, regaining its footing, launched counterattacks on Sith-occupied worlds, gradually reclaiming lost territory. What was once an empire of strength became a chaotic battlefield. Entire planets were turned to ash, their populations slaughtered as the Sith waged war amongst themselves. The dream of a united Sith Empire envisioned by Bane had become a nightmare of destruction. And then, After nearly a century of conflict, the Sith finally collapsed. What if Darth Plagueis had returned after Palpatine's fall? The galaxy burned, and Darth Plagueis the Wise watched it all. His apprentice, the one he had trained, the one he had trusted, had betrayed him. Darth Sidious had thought himself clever, had thought his master dead, but Plagueis had not revealed all of his secrets. The art of manipulating midichlorians had been his greatest triumph, a discovery that went beyond simple preservation. It granted him something more, true immortality. And so, as he drew breath once more, his eyes opened to a galaxy that had forgotten him, a galaxy that would learn to fear his name again. But first, he would need an apprentice. In the darkness, a boy dreamed of the past. Petro was no longer a child, but the scars of his youth remained. He had once been a Jedi youngling, full of fire and arrogance, training alongside his closest friends, Kituni, Gunji, Zat. Now they were gone, slaughtered. Petro had survived Order 66, but at a terrible cost. He had lived a life of running, of hiding, of watching everything he cared for be stripped away. His heart had hardened, his fate had shattered, and in his sleep he called out for them. Kituni, Gunji, please, don't leave me. From the shadows of the ruined temple, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked, deathless. Darth Plagueis. He had been watching, waiting. A boy with power, consumed by pain. A perfect apprentice. Petro awoke with a start, feeling the chill in the air. A presence, ancient, suffocating. The figure stepped forward. You called for the dead, his voice rasped. But the dead do not answer. Petro's breath hitched. Who are you? I am your salvation, Plagueis responded. And I will ensure you never feel helpless again. On the forsaken world of Abra, Petro was reforged in darkness. Plagueis was a patient teacher, colder than Sidious, wiser than Bane. He did not rush Petro's training, nor did he allow him to succumb to reckless hate. No, the boy's rage was a weapon, and weapons needed to be forged. The training was brutal, meditation and absolute isolation, combat against assassin droids programmed to kill, long hours of pain, of discipline, of breaking down everything the Jedi had once taught him. Plagueis did not hide the truth. The Sith do not promise power, he said. They demand it. They take it. And if you are weak, the galaxy will take it from you. Petro's hands shook with exhaustion. His mind was battered, his spirit tested. But he would not be weak again. When his training was complete, he was no longer a boy. He was a storm. And Plagueis, he smiled. His apprentice was ready. The galaxy rejoiced in the wake of Palpatine's death. The Empire crumbled, and the new Republic was born. But peace was an illusion. From the darkness, Petro was unleashed. His first target, Wedge Antilles. The legendary pilot never saw it coming. A single strike of Petro's crimson blade, and a hero of the rebellion was dead. Next came Mon Mothma, the voice of the New Republic, assassinated in her own chambers. One by one, key figures of the rebellion fell, struck down by a phantom they could not understand. Luke Skywalker felt it, the tremors in the Force, a presence rising in the dark. He would have to act, and so his hunt began. Luke Skywalker arrived too late. The scent of charred metal and blood lingered in the air as he stepped into the wreckage of Wedge Antilles' private docking bay. The walls were scarred with deep saber cuts, still smoking from the heat of a Sith's blade. The hangar was eerily silent, save for the soft hum of emergency lights flickering in the darkness. He knew before he even saw the body. Wedge lay crumpled near his starfighter, his flight suit torn, his chest bearing a smouldering wound. The angle was precise, efficient. Whoever had done this was not some mindless killer. They had studied Wedge's movements, his routine, and had struck at the perfect moment. Luke knelt beside his fallen friend, pressing his hand against the cooling fabric of Wedge's uniform. He closed his eyes, and he felt it. A presence, dark, cold, elusive. His head snapped up, eyes scanning the catwalks above the hangar. And there, just for a heartbeat, he saw him. A figure cloaked in black, watching from the shadows. Before Luke could react, Petro vanished, slipping into the darkness like a ghost. "Wait!" Luke called, his voice swallowed by the emptiness. He reached out with the Force, trying to grab a hold of Petro's presence, to pin him down, but it was like trying to catch smoke. No sooner did he grasp it than it shifted, faded, disappearing into the void. Luke stood there, jaw clenched. Whoever this was, they were not just a killer. The moment Luke stepped into Mon Mothma's private residence, he knew. It had happened again. The guards at the entrance were lifeless, their bodies still warm, their deaths eerily silent. The method was identical, precise slashes, single lethal strikes. No wasted movement, no theatrics, only purpose. He moved quickly, stepping through the opulent corridors until he reached the grand study, and there, beneath the dim glow of an ornate chandelier, lay the leader of the New Republic. Mon Mothma's eyes were still open, frozen in shock. Her elegant robes were soaked with crimson, her frail hands clutching at a wound she had never seen coming. Luke exhaled, a slow, steady breath. Then, that feeling returned. The hairs on the back of his neck rose. A whisper in the Force, a presence. He turned just in time to see the flicker of movement in the reflection of a glass window. Petro. Luke ignited his saber in an instant, emerald light flooding the room as he rushed forward. Too slow. A single blink, and Petro was gone. Luke skidded to a halt, his breath heavy, his heart pounded in his chest. He had never felt something like this before. The dark side was always overwhelming, suffocating. But this was different. It was hollow, like chasing a shadow through an endless abyss. Then he heard it, a voice in his mind, ancient, cold, amused. "Come, Skywalker, you know where this road leads." And he did. The darkness was calling him to Malachor. Plagueis had chosen Malachor for a reason. The planet was soaked in ancient darkness, a world where Jedi had fallen before, where Sith had carved their power into the bones of the dead. It was here that he would end the last of the Jedi. Luke landed on Malachor beneath a storm-choked sky. The air was thick with the weight of the past. Ancient Sith temples, Shattered war machines and the fields of petrified corpses surrounded him like a silent graveyard. The world itself pulsed with dark energy, its very soil tainted by centuries of bloodshed. Then he felt it, a presence waiting for him in the ruins, a familiar presence. Petro. Luke approached cautiously, his emerald blade igniting with a sharp snap hiss. His voice was steady but firm. "You don't have to do this." Petro stepped into the light, his crimson saber casting a glow over his scarred face. His eyes were hollow, empty, yet filled with fury. "You think I want peace?" he spat. "You abandoned us. The Jedi let my friends die." Luke's grip tightened. "I would have saved you." Petro snarled, "I don't need saving." And he attacked. Their sabers clashed in a burst of colour, sending sparks flying across the ruins. Petro fought with ferocity, a storm of relentless strikes and unpredictable movements. He was fast, too fast for someone who had once been a Jedi youngling. Plagueis had trained him well, but Luke had fought against the darkness before. He didn't meet Petro's rage with rage. He didn't match his power with power. Instead, he waited, watching, studying. Petro was strong, but he was reckless. A gap in his defense, a single mistake. Luke found his opening and struck. His saber carved through Petro's shoulder, sending the Sith apprentice staggering back. Petro clutched his wound, breathing heavily, fury twisting his expression. "You're not strong enough," Luke said, voice heavy with regret. Petro roared and lunged again. Luke's saber slashed clean through his chest. For a moment, there was only silence. Petro stumbled, his grip on his weapon loosening. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground, the crimson light of his saber flickering out. Luke knelt beside him, watching as the life drained from his eyes. Petro's lip trembled. In his final breath, he whispered a name. "Gunji." And then he was gone. And Luke felt nothing but sorrow. But before he could mourn, the darkness shifted. A cold wind swept through the ruins. Luke turned. A shadow loomed over him. And from the blackness, Plagueis stepped forth. Darth Plagueis regarded Luke with quiet amusement. "You fight well," he said, "but you are a child, playing with your father's sword." Luke's green saber ignited once more. "Then I'll prove you wrong." Plagueis raised a single hand, and the ground itself trembled. The ruins of Malachor twisted, ancient Sith energy rising as pillars of stone erupted from the ground. Luke barely dodged as one nearly crushed him. The Sith Lord moved, faster than any being of his stature had a right to. His saber came down like a warhammer, sending shockwaves through the air. Luke blocked, the impact sent pain up his arms. This wasn't like fighting Vader. It wasn't even like fighting Palpatine. Plagueis was precise. His every movement was not just an attack, but a test. Luke was losing ground. Fast. Plagueis suddenly gestured, and the air around Luke collapsed. The Jedi was crushed by unseen hands, lifted into the air as if gripped by an invisible vice. "You see now, don't you?" Plagueis murmured. "I am eternal." Luke clenched his teeth and pushed back. The force exploded from him, shattering Plagueis' hold. The Sith staggered, just for a moment, long enough for Luke to strike. His saber pierced Plagueis' chest. The Sith Lord froze, looked down, and laughed. "You think this is the end?" His body slumped to the ground, motionless, and Luke, exhausted, let out a breath. It was finally over. Or so he thought. Deep beneath Malachor, a whisper, a breath, a pair of golden eyes snapped open. Plagueis lived. The galaxy would never be rid of him. What if Darth Vader had returned to train Kylo Ren? The Dark Lord of the Sith stood alone, deep within the ruins of an ancient temple. Darth Vader searched for something that should not exist. The galaxy whispered of it in forgotten texts, in the records of a lost civilization, a place outside of time, a realm where past and future converged, the world between worlds. The name had haunted him ever since he first uncovered traces of it in the archives of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. If such a place was real, then it held the power to rewrite fate itself, to undo what had been done, to bring her back, Padme. His gauntleted fists clenched at the thought of her name. His breath a slow, mechanical hiss. The pain never dulled, not with the years, not with the power he had gained. It only grew sharper, like a wound that refused to close. It was Palpatine's fault. No, his own. Anakin Skywalker had died on Mustafar, but before his death, he had made a promise. I can save you, Padme. I won't lose you the way I lost my mother. That promise had been broken. Unless the Force could be bent, reshaped, unless the past could be reached through this secret pathway. Vader moved deeper into the temple. The air was thick with dust and decay, the remnants of a civilization long dead. His boots crushed brittle bones as he walked, the skeletal remains of those who had sought the same forbidden knowledge before him. They had failed. He would not. His breath echoed through the chamber as he approached an ancient doorway, its surface carved with symbols he did not recognize. But the power, he could feel it. It resonated through the Force, beckoning him forward. A flick of his hand, and the heavy stone doors shuddered apart. Beyond them lay something impossible, a vast expanse of swirling energy, a gateway suspended in darkness. Threads of light weaved together, creating endless pathways stretching into eternity. Whispers drifted from beyond the veil, voices from different moments in time. Some were from the past, some were from the future. But one voice, one single fragile voice, made Vader freeze in place. Anakin. His fist clenched, his chest tightened beneath his armor. Padme. He took a step forward, drawn by her voice. Another step. The Force rippled, the darkness shattered, and suddenly the galaxy twisted around him. The temple, the portal, the whispers, all of it collapsed inward as Vader was ripped from time itself. There was no up, no down, no past, no future, only a howling void. Until he fell through. Vader crashed onto cold Jorasteel, his heavy boots grinding against shattered rubble as he took in his surroundings. Coruscant, but not his Coruscant. The city had once stood as the jewel of the Empire, was now a lawless, broken world. Towers that had once reached toward the heavens now stood cracked and abandoned. The grand avenues where Imperial troops had once marched in formation were now overrun with gangs and filth. Smog choked the air, the streets filled with criminals peddling stolen technology, spice, and debt. The Empire was gone. Vader stretched out with the Force. Where was his master? But he felt nothing, no trace of Palpatine. Instead, he felt something else. A darkness, familiar, yet different. A Skywalker's power, but not his own. The presence was strong, untamed, raw, yet undeniably filled with the dark side. Vader's hand clenched into a fist. If my master is gone, I will find who has inherited my power. The darkness called him from Ilum, and so he set his course. Starkiller Base. The Sith had defiled Ilum, carving its frozen surface into a monstrous weapon. But Vader paid it no mind. His focus was on the throne room, where the dark presence burned like a beacon. He entered the vast chamber and saw him, a boy, cloaked in black armor, kneeling before a pedestal. Upon it lay a broken artifact. Vader's helmet. The boy's voice was reverent. Show me the power of the darkness. Tell me what I must do to finish what you started. Vader took a step forward. You seek guidance. Kylo whirled around, eyes wide beneath his mask. For a moment, he stood frozen. Then he fell to his knees. My lord. His voice was breathless, filled with awe. You live. Vader looked down at the trembling boy before him. He reached out with the Force, piercing Kylo's mind. Pain, conflict, a shattered soul, desperate for purpose. Vader's voice was cold. Rise, boy, and tell me everything. Kylo Ren obeyed, eagerly recounting the events of the galaxy, the fall of the Empire, the rise of the New Republic, and the formation of the First Order, how he had taken the mantle of the dark side in Vader's absence. Vader listened, his fury growing. The Empire had been wasted, the Sith had been lost. You are not a Sith. Vader's voice was heavy with contempt. You kneel before my broken shell and beg for guidance, yet you know nothing of true power. Kylo's fists clenched. You will learn. The training was brutal. Vader broke Kylo, forcing him to unlearn the pathetic techniques Snoke had taught him. He drilled into him the ancient ways of the Sith, forging him into a weapon of true power. But there was one who stood in opposition. General Hux. The man was suspicious of Vader, viewing him as a relic of the past. He tried to move against him. Vader responded the only way he knew how. The moment Hux stepped into the war room to voice his dissent, Vader raised a hand. The general's throat collapsed. His body lifted into the air, trashing, until it didn't. The First Order belonged to Vader now. The New Republic world of Taris was thriving. It had been one of the first planets liberated from Imperial control after the fall of the Empire. Once a wasteland, it was now a hub of prosperity, a beacon of hope in the Outer Rim. The city skyline was filled with towering spires, bustling markets, and people who believed in the promise of peace. But peace was a lie. The sky burned red as Star Destroyers of the First Order, now under the command of Darth Vader, emerged from hyperspace like hungry predators. The invasion was swift, calculated. Kylo Ren led the charge on the surface, cutting through the New Republic defenses with brutal efficiency. But the true horror came when Vader himself descended from the sky. He marched through the streets like death incarnate, his black armor gleaming beneath the inferno of burning skyscrapers. He did not rush. There was no need. The mere sight of him sent the defenders into chaos. Vader raised a single hand. A dozen soldiers clutched their throats as they were lifted from their ground, their eyes bulging in terror. He clenched his fist, and their bodies collapsed, crushed by an invisible force. Civilians ran. It didn't matter. Vader extended his palm. The walls of an entire apartment block caved inward, reducing it to rubble with all of its occupants inside. The New Republic fleet scrambled at starfighters, but Vader lifted his gaze to the sky and reached out with the Force. Two X-Wings suddenly veered off course, their pilots screaming as their controls were ripped from their grasp. They smashed into each other in a fiery explosion. Vader strode forward. In his wake, only ruin remained. Across the galaxy, Luke Skywalker awoke with a gasp. The stone hut on Ahch-To was silent except for the distant waves crashing against the cliffs. But the peace of the island had been shattered. Luke sat up, breath heavy. He had felt it. A darkness so overwhelming that it suffocated the Force itself. A planet screaming out in agony before its people's voice was silenced forever. He rose to his feet, his mind racing, the presence he had sensed. It was impossible. It was Vader. His father was long dead. He had died in Luke's arms. He had been redeemed. And yet, the dark side did not lie. Luke turned, already knowing he would not stay here any longer. He reached out into the Force, searching for Leia across the vast expanse of space. Leia. He felt her on Chandrila, the New Republic's capital. A ship waited for him at the shore. It had remained untouched since he had come to this island, the place he had chosen for his exile after his failure. But that exile was over. The storm raged across the ruined landscape. Luke stood before Vader, his father's dark presence suffocating the battlefield like a black hole. His voice was as it always had been, low, mechanical, absolute. "You have grown strong, my son." Luke's heart pounded. "How are you here?" "The Force has willed it." "Father, you turned back once. You don't have to do this." Vader took a step forward. "It is you who does not understand. The dark side is your destiny. I have returned to bring you home." Luke's stomach twisted, but before he could respond, another voice broke through the storm. "You would replace me?" From the shadows, Kylo Ren emerged, his rage filling the air like static electricity. His crossguard saber ignited, crackling with barely contained fury. His breathing was ragged. Kylo had heard everything. Luke turned, his heart aching at the sight of his fallen apprentice. "Ben." Kylo flinched at the name, his grip tightening around his weapon. "Don't call me that." "But you are Ben Solo." Luke's voice was firm, but pleading. "You are a Skywalker. That name means something. It means you are meant for the light." Kylo hesitated. His fingers twitched. "Ben," Luke's voice softened. "It's not too late." Kylo's breath shuddered. He felt the pull, deep within his soul. He could turn back. He could... Vader's red blade plunged through his back. Kylo gasped. His saber slipped from his hands, deactivating as it fell to the ground. Vader pulled his weapon free, letting Kylo collapse onto the dirt. Luke's face contorted in horror. No! He was weak, Vader said coldly. You are the one I want. Luke's eyes burned with fury, and then his lightsaber snapped forward. It was the greatest battle of their lives. Luke came at Vader with speed and power, his blade a blur of green light. Vader met him, strike for strike, his crimson saber cutting through the darkness like a burning wound in reality itself. They fought across the ruined battlefield, their duel shaking the ground beneath them. Luke leapt, flipping over Vader's head, his saber slashing downward. Vader whirled, parrying and countering with a forceful strike that sent sparks flying. You have learned much, Vader admitted. Vader pressed forward, his blows growing stronger. Luke's knees buckled under the sheer weight of each strike, but he refused to fall. They fought on the edge of a ruined temple, the ground beneath them crumbling. Luke somersaulted back, narrowly avoiding a killing blow, then thrust his hand forward. A shockwave of force energy exploded outward, sending Vader flying back. Vader landed hard, but before he could recover, Luke was on him. He swung in a flurry of rapid strikes, forcing Vader into full defense. Sparks flew, the air thick with the scent of scorched metal as Luke's blade chipped away at Vader's armor. With a final, mighty strike, Luke severed Vader's right arm at the elbow. The Sith Lord fell to one knee, his saber dropped, his breathing ragged, sparks crackling from the wound. Luke stood over him, lightsaber raised. This ends now. Vader attempted to strike out with the Force. Luke sliced straight across, decapitating Vader. For a single moment, there was silence. Luke turned away, leaving Vader kneeling in the ruins. Goodbye, Father. What if Darth Talon became an apprentice to Darth Maul? The galaxy was in turmoil, and in the shadows of chaos, Darth Maul stirred. His return to power had been short-lived. His dominance over Mandalore shattered. His Shadow Collective left leaderless, and worst of all, his brother, Savage Opress, slaughtered before his very eyes. He had underestimated his former master. Darth Sidious had humiliated him, dragging him from the throne of Mandalore like a rabid dog, caging him in a hellish prison meant to break him. But Maul was not so easily broken. With the aid of loyal remnants of his syndicates, he had escaped, slinking back into the underworld to lick his wounds and prepare. But he needed more than just soldiers. The galaxy belonged to those who seized it through power. Alone, he was strong, but with an apprentice, with a proper heir, someone to shape and mold in his own image, he could build something far greater than before. His mind burned with thoughts of vengeance. Obi-Wan Kenobi still lived. Sidious still ruled. The Jedi and Sith, both had wronged him. He would carve a new order from the ashes of the old. Maul issued a command to his remaining lieutenants across the scattered remains of the Shadow Collective. Find me Force sensitives. Find me warriors. Find me someone worthy. But fate had already made its choice for him. She found him first. The underworld of the Outer Rim was a vast and lawless expanse, where only the ruthless thrived. It was here, in the criminal strongholds of the galaxy, that Maul sought to rebuild his empire. Unbeknownst to him, He was being hunted. Darth Talon had been watching him for weeks. She had heard whispers of the fallen Sith Lord, the one who had defied both Jedi and Sith alike, a warrior who had once wielded the mantle of Darth, a being of pure rage. She followed him unseen, her crimson skin blending with the darkness of Nar Shaddaa's underbelly, her Force presence carefully masked. Yet she knew she could not hide forever. Maul was no fool. He had begun to sense her. One night, as Maul meditated in an abandoned temple of an extinct cult, his voice echoed through the Force. "You cannot hide from me." Talon crouched in the shadows above, tensed. "Come out." With a flicker of motion, she dropped from above, landing in a crouch, her twin sabers igniting in a crimson blaze. "You are strong," Maul observed, his voice eerily calm. "But you are reckless." Talon wasted no words. She lunged, striking at his throat. Maul moved like a spectre, effortlessly avoiding her first strike. Then the next. He barely lifted his saber. He did not need to. With the grace of a master, he twisted around her, his elbows smashing into her ribs. Talon gritted her teeth and rolled back, slashing upward. Maul dodged once more, and in a blur of motion, he was upon her. A powerful kick sent her crashing against a cold stone wall. Her lightsabers clattered to the floor. She reached out with the Force, but Maul was already there, his crimson blade at her throat. "Who trained you?" he demanded. She glared at him, breathing hard. "I trained myself." For a long moment, Maul stared. Then he did something unexpected. He deactivated his weapon. "I will train you." Darth Talon's training took place on the cruel world of Dathomir. The ancient home of the Night Brothers and Night Sisters was swept in dark energy, its twisted landscapes of jagged red rock, corrupted forests crawling with beasts born from nightmares. It was a world of pain and survival, where the weak were devoured and only the strong endured. Talon's training began the moment they arrived. Maul did not ease her into it. He flung her into the depths of Dathomir's wilderness, giving her only one command: survive. For weeks, Talon knew only pain. She fought off packs of night hunters, reptilian beasts with fangs that dripped venom. She was stalked by the spirits of long-dead witches, their whispers clawing at her sanity. She was given no food, no shelter, only her instincts and her will to live. Her first lesson was brutality. "The galaxy is not kind," Maul told her, watching from the shadows as she battled a monstrous Wyshok, a spider the size of a speeder. "It does not care for the weak. It does not reward mercy. You must be crueler than cruel, stronger than the strong." Talon learned. She stopped fearing the creatures that hunted her. Instead, she became the predator. She slew the spider with bare hands, ripping one of its legs off and using it as a weapon against the next threat. Her second lesson was endurance. Maul forced her to fight for days without rest, pushing her body past its limits. He lashed at her with training sabers, broke her bones, and made her keep fighting. "Pain is your ally," he hissed, as she gasped on the ground. "It will make you sharper, stronger. You must welcome it, embrace it." Her third lesson was deception. One night, as she slept in the roots of a gnarled tree, Maul attacked. He struck from the darkness, his saber flashing toward her throat. only for Talon to roll aside at the last moment, her own blade igniting. She had sensed him coming. "Good," Maul said, stepping back. "Always be aware. Treachery is the way of the Sith, even from your master." Talon bared her teeth. "Then I will be ready." Maul smirked. "We shall see." Maul stood before Talon, his gaze cold and calculating. "Your training is incomplete," he told her. "You have strength, you have skill, but you have yet to truly kill." Talon frowned. "I have killed dozens of—" "Jedi," Maul interrupted. "True prey, not weaklings, not beasts. Jedi." He handed her a small datapad, the hologram flickering to life. The image showed an older Jedi Master and his Padawan, a young Miralin girl barely in her teens. "These two are your test. Kill them. Take their sabers. Only then will you be worthy." Talon accepted the challenge without hesitation. She tracked them to a distant moon, a barren rock where they were aiding a village caught between warlords. Talon watched them for hours from the shadows, studying their movements. The Jedi Master was disciplined, strong in the Force. The Padawan was cautious, uncertain. The moment came at sunset. Talon struck with fury, her blades a crimson whirlwind. The Master barely had time to react before she was upon him. He fought well. He parried, dodged, striking with controlled precision. But Talon was faster, more relentless. The Padawan screamed as her master fell, his head rolling into the dust. The girl's fear made her sloppy. She tried to run. Talon caught her with a brutal slash across the back. The fight ended with the Miralin sobbing in the dirt, her saber hand severed. "Please," the girl whispered. Talon hesitated. For only a second. Then she silenced the girl forever. When she returned to Maul, she dropped the two lightsabers at his feet. Maul grinned. "Now, you are my apprentice." Jabba the Hutt had defied him long enough. Maul and Talon descended upon Tatooine like a storm. Jabba, ever the coward, tried to bite him off. Promised credits, spice, entire fleets. Maul was not interested. "You rule the Outer Rim at my mercy," Maul told him, stepping forward. "And my mercy is gone." Jabba sneered. His guards moved to attack. Talon struck first. Her blade cut through Gamorrean flesh like butter, her movements a dance of death. Maul carved his way through Weequay and Nikto enforcers, his rage an unstoppable force. Jabba, wheezing in panic, tried to slither away, only for Talon to leap onto his massive bulk, her saber held at his throat. "Submit," she hissed. The Hutt King whimpered. Jabba's reign was over. The Shadow Collective was whole again. The Outer Rim was theirs. The Jedi Temple was quiet, save for the low murmurs of the Council. Reports had reached him. Maul was rebuilding his empire. The Outer Rim was slipping under his control. His apprentice, an unknown female Sith, was slaughtering Jedi. Master Mace Windu scowled. "We should crush him now, before he grows too powerful." But Yoda shook his head. "War, we already have. Split our focus, we cannot. Dangerous Maul is, but greater dangers we face." They made their decision. For now, Maul would be left unchecked. It was a mistake that would cost them dearly. Maul's obsession with Kenobi festered like a wound. Talon had seen him spend weeks poring over reports, setting traps, weaving intricate plots. He ignored opportunities to seize Coruscant's trade routes, to cripple the Republic. Your revenge is a distraction, Talon told him, her voice sharp. We should be taking planets, expanding our reach, not chasing a single Jedi. Maul turned to her, his eyes blazing. Kenobi took everything from me. Talon sneered. And what have you taken? A barren wasteland? A Hutt's throne? We could rule the galaxy. Maul clenched his fists. Kenobi must suffer first. For the first time, Talon saw it. Maul would never be more than what he was, and she was destined for more. Talon acted alone. Maul obsessed over Kenobi, so she did what he would not. She took. The world of Rat-Attack was a fortress world, ruled by ruthless warlords. Talon descended upon it with an iron will. She slew their strongest warriors in ritual combat. She crushed their armies with ruthless efficiency. She forced the survivors to kneel. When the battle was done, the world was hers. She stood atop its tallest spire, her crimson eyes burning with triumph. She no longer needed Maul. She was ready. Talon had waited long enough. Maul was a warrior, a tactician, a master of battle, but he was still ruled by his past. His obsession with Kenobi, with petty revenge. Talon wanted more. She wanted the throne of the Sith itself. And so, one night, as Maul lay in meditation, she struck. Her lightsaber hissed to life as she leapt through the air, only for Maul's eyes to snap open. He was already moving before she landed. Their blades clashed in an explosion of red light. Talon was fast, her movements precise, but Maul was a storm of fury. He drove her back with a relentless assault, his twin sabers spinning like a whirlwind of death. "You dare!" he snarled. Talon grinned through the struggle. "I learned from the best." Their battle was fierce, a dance of speed and brutality. Talon fought with agility, her acrobatics carrying her above and around Maul, striking at his blind spots. But Maul was power incarnate. Each strike of his saber sent shockwaves through the room. Then, with a flicker of motion, Talon fainted, her saber slashing through Maul's legs. He fell for it. In that brief moment, she spun and drove her second blade toward his chest, but Maul was faster. With a roar, he caught her wrist, twisted it, and sent her crashing to the stone floor. His saber was at her throat once more. She glared up at him, her breath ragged. "Kill me." Maul hesitated. He saw himself in her, the raw ambition, the endless hunger, and then he laughed. "No," he said. "You are strong, but you are not strong enough." Talon spat blood and smirked. "Not yet." Maul deactivated his lightsaber and turned away. "Find me when you are." And with that, he left her behind. Talon lay there for a long time, the weight of her failure pressing down on her. But as she stared at the ceiling, she made a silent vow. This was not the end. One day she would return, and next time she would win. Drop the scenarios you would like to see in the comments, and I will pick one every week for Fan Friday. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.